The stars had not moved in 70 years. They hung above the corpse of Cadia like mourners at a silent funeral, their light dimmed by the scars of battle and the unnatural veil of the war. The eye of Terra loomed vast and malignant on the galactic horizon, no longer a distant threat, but a gaping wound torn into reality itself, a bleeding ulcer in the sky. It pulsed slowly, like a dying heart, as if the galaxy itself now breathed to its rhythm.
And still, something moved in the dark.
Through the shattered bones of a broken defense grid, past the gravestone hulks of 1,000 Imperial warships, one vessel drifted, silent, ancient, defiant. It had no name visible on its hull. No beacon lit its path, but its vox systems occasionally sputtered low, Imperial binaric, as if trying to remember a purpose long forgotten. That ship was once the Peregrine Shade, once a proud Cadian vessel, now a relic, a tomb, and yet not empty. We have not forgotten you. We truly love and care for you. You, the listener who still dreams beneath fading stars. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. Within the bowels of the Shade, under failing lumen strips and rusting banners, the sound of boots echoed with mechanical precision. Marching, always marching, rows of Cadian shock troopers moved down the corridors, formation perfect, eyes vacant. Their armor bore the green and grey of a regiment long since declared extinct. Many bore wounds no living man could survive, shattered ribs, exposed bone, melted flak plates fused to charred flesh. And yet they moved. At their head strode Commissar Vortin Holt, tall, gaunt, and pale, his greatcoat still immaculate, though time had dimmed the crimson stripe to a dull rust brown. His cap was angled just so, his bolt pistol holstered with ceremonial neatness. His stride bore the weight of doctrine, and something heavier still. We passed through the barracks. Each bunk stood made, each weapon on its rack. Troopers stood at parade rest, beside lockers, faces blank and lifeless, eyes fixed forward. Holt paused before one, a boy, no more than 19, whose nameplate read, Terra. Cadet Terra, Holt said softly, voice gravel-laced from disuse. Report. Terra didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move. Holt stared into the boy's face, the same face from 70 years ago. His voice dropped to a whisper. You shouldn't still be here. A cold breeze stirred the air. Impossible in a sealed environment. He turned sharply and resumed his march. There was always duty. Even now, especially now. At the bridge, he stood before a cracked command lectern. Dust coated the console, yet the screen flickered weakly to life at his presence.
Mission status incomplete.
Imperium directive, a secure relic, redacted coordinates, encrypted. Regimental status, unknown. He entered his code. Wiedholt commissarial clearance, Omega Black. The screen did not deny him. It simply updated. Status, awaiting final deployment. He stared, unmoving. I remember dying, he whispered to himself. I remember the fire, the warp, tearing the skies, the command bunker falling. I remember. He reached out to steady himself, hand shaking. The console felt cold, not metal, but stone, worn smooth by years of hands, just like his. Or maybe only. The voximeter crackled. Cordia. A voice hissed through static. Cordia still. He spun. Who said that? The bridge was empty. Silent, save for the soft click of boots. As Sergeant Garvin approached, his sergeant, his right hand. Holt hadn't seen Garvin blink in decades. Report, Holt said. Garvin stopped, saluted, and said nothing. The smell of burned ozone filled the air. Holt dismissed him with a nod. Back in his private quarters, little more than a Spartan chamber with a faded imperial creed etched into the wall. Holt knelt before a small shrine to the Emperor. The Aquila above it had cracked, one wing gone. He placed his bolt pistol at the altar and bowed his head. "Lord of humanity," he whispered, "I do not know what I am. I do not know what I have become, but my men still follow me, and so I march for Cadia, for you, even if you have forsaken us." He waited. No answer came. No warmth. No light. Only the dull hum of forgotten machinery. In his mind he replayed that final day again. The Cadian surface breaking. The screams. The light. He held his men together. Ordered the retreat. But retreat to where? There had been a signal. A voice on the Vox. A mission. The words had bled from his mind like smoke through broken glass. He looked to the wall. Scratched into the metal, in his own hand, were the words,
"We are the last."
"We stand still. We deliver." He did not remember writing them. The klaxon sounded suddenly. Not loud, but soft, like something remembering how to scream. Holt snapped to his feet. Back on the bridge, the console had shifted. Signal received. Sorcerer, Imperial Relay Station. Location Outer Obscurus, Dead Zone.
Authority, Inquisitorial, Black Level Override.
Mission reinitiated. His throat tightened. The display showed coordinates. A world listed as redacted. No name, no atmosphere, no known record in the cogitator banks. But the signal was real, and it bore his name. Holt turned slowly. Behind him, 2 platoons had assembled silently. Rows of dead men in perfect formation. Helmets lowered, rifles held, chins up. He walked before them. He looked into each empty face. "You followed me into fire," he said. "You stayed when all others fled. You have held this line for 70 years. And now we march again." He raised his arm. "To duty." No voice replied, but all 20 boots struck the deck as one. He smiled faintly, bitterly. Cadians never fall, and the dead began to march. There is a silence in the void, not absence of sound, but something deeper, more ancient. The quiet between breaths, the pause before a dying man speaks. That is the silence that filled the peregrine shade, as it glided through the forgotten stars of the outer obscurus. The ship had not fired its weapons in 70 years. Its engines burned low, like the final embers of a long-dead flame. And yet, within, the lights flickered with erratic life, the walls pulsed with residual warmth, and the dead, the regiment of Cadia's 71st, continued to march. Commissar Holt stood in the Vox Chapel, a narrow chamber deep within the communication deck. Candles lined the consoles, melted into metallic grooves. The servo skulls that once manned the Vox stations had long since fallen, their bones cracked and oculars dim. But the machine still worked. Somehow, a low-frequency whine emanated from the central cogitator array, like a whisper trying to remember how to speak. He stood before the emitter, hands behind his back, posture stiff as if being observed by an unseen tribunal. "Repeat the last transmission," he said. A chorus of static played. Then, like breath against a frozen window, a voice emerged. "Dear Holt, deliverance still possible. You must..." Then it cut to silence again. Holt's lips thinned. He had heard it before. 7 times now, always fragmented. Always just enough to be real, or to be madness. He tapped the control panel. "Origin?" A monotone servitor voice buzzed back. "Unknown. Signal degradation. 87%. Possibly rebroadcast through warp echoes. Of course, the war." Nothing stayed clean in this part of the galaxy. Time moved like oil in water, memories congealed. Signals doubled back on themselves. And truth, once absolute, frayed at its edges, until only faith remained. Behind Holt, Sergeant Garvin stood motionless, like a statue watching a fading fire. His helmet was off. Holt had insisted on seeing their faces now, even if they didn't change. Even if some had started to rot.
You hear it too?
Holt asked softly.
Garvin didn't blink, but Holt imagined, in some fractured shard of himself, that he saw a flicker of acknowledgement. Or perhaps he just needed it.
He leaned closer to the vox emitter. This is Commissar Vorton Holt of Cadia's 71st Regiment. We are en route to coordinates received from Imperial Relay 9 Gamma. Estimated arrival 6 hours. Mission designation remains unclear. Request clarification and reinforcement. He hesitated. We endure. He released the vox key and stepped back. There was no reply. There never was. Later, in the shadowed corridors of the Shade, Holt wandered alone. The walls of the ship spoke in creaks and groans. Not mechanical failure, but something stranger, as if the vessel were dreaming in its age, replaying old memories in steel and rust. He passed a doorway where troopers stood, unmoving. One turned its head slightly as he passed. They never spoke, never asked questions, but they followed. He arrived at what once served as the regimental chapel. The statues were broken, saints torn from their plinths. The God Emperor's face scoured clean by heat or hatred. Only the twin-headed Aquila remained, its wings broken at the hinges. Holt knelt before it, breath slow. He whispered, not to the Emperor, but to Cadia, not to the divine, but to the dead.
I don't remember how I got here, he said aloud. I remember the bombardment, the sky breaking. I remember ordering the fallback, telling the wounded they'd be safe. I remember...
His voice shook. I remember dying. He pressed his gloved hand to his chest, over the spot where the last blast had struck. There had been pain. There had been fire. But now, only coal. I remember the warp bleeding through the cracks. I remember seeing him, or something, wearing his face. He looked up at the broken Aquila. Was it mercy or punishment? From behind him, a faint click echoed, the sound of boots approaching. It was Terra, the boy soldier with the pale eyes. His skin was waxen. His jaw hung ever so slightly open. As if mid-breath, he stopped just behind Holt. Do you remember? Holt asked. No reply, but the boy saluted. Holt closed his eyes. Then that will have to be enough. The signal came again 3 hours later, this time louder. The ship's command deck shivered with resonance. Holt stood at the lectern, surrounded by his top officers, all of them long dead, eyes vacant, awaiting orders with mechanical devotion. The vox boom cracked across the deck. Inquisitor Saurafane. Classified designation Theta Malleus. Orders deliver the artifact. Holt, you must complete. Must not be lost. The message ended. The sigil. Holt's breath caught in his throat. In the depths of his memory, behind the noise, beneath the shattered memories, he remembered her, Saurafane. The Inquisitor. She had arrived during the final hours of Cadia's fall, with a sealed relic case and words of doom. You must take this, she had told him, to the stars, to where the warp cannot follow. He had sworn to deliver it, but then the sky had burned. The ground had split. He had died, or thought he had. He turned to Garvin. We never completed the mission. Garvin stood silent. Holt felt the ghost of something old stir inside his chest. Not warmth, not hope, but duty. The last thing he had clung to when all else had crumbled. He pressed his hand to the console. Recalculate course. Prepare for jump. The Mechanicus engine priest to his left twitched, a creature more machine than man. His voice now only bursts of static and write code. It obeyed without protest. The shade shifted in the void, realigning toward the signal's origin, a word listed only as redacted, a red dot pulsing like a heartbeat in deep space. Holt spoke to the bridge. We are not lost, he said. We are late. Then, more softly, and the Emperor protects even the forgotten. His men did not speak, but they turned as one. Boots echoed down the halls once more, and somewhere in the deep blackness between stars, the laughter of something old and hungry stirred. As hours passed, Holt returned to his private chamber, though he no longer slept. His bed had remained untouched for decades. He sat instead at the desk and opened his journal. Its pages were torn, scrawled with mad loops and repetitions, but he wrote anyway. He needed to see the words. We are the last. We stand still.
We deliver.
He closed the journal and stared into the mirror. His face stared back, pale, drawn, eyes sunken. But the face in the reflection tilted slightly. He had not moved. The face smiled. He recoiled, stumbling back. When he looked again, it was only him, unmoving. The vox crackled once more, this time from his quarters. You never left, Holt, the voice said. You never left Cadia. He lunged at the vox, slamming the receiver off. But the voice lingered in his head, cold and sure. You are the message, and they are your ring. In the darkness of the hold, the soldiers of Cadia's 71st stood at ready. Each helmet bore the sigil of their world, each chest plate cracked and worn, but their eyes, hollow and glassy, all turned toward the stars.
Waiting. Not for orders,
but for purpose. There are worlds that history forgets. Dead planets sealed by decree, their names redacted from Imperial record, their coordinates buried beneath vaults of silence. Not because they are unimportant, but because they are too dangerous to remember. The peregrine shade arrived above such a world. It had no name, only a designation, UX 998, Kappa. Once charted in the Inquisitorial archives, now expunged, locked behind black clearance codes. Even Holt had no right to access, and yet the coordinates pulsed steadily on his star map, as if remembering him. The planet below was lifeless. A glass-scoured sphere where the sun's light barely touched the surface. Its atmosphere was stripped by fire or deliberate design, leaving only skeletal mountains and fields of ash orbiting it, like vultures around a corpse or the drifting remains of a shattered blockade. Imperial frigates torn in half, Mechanicus pickets cracked open like eggs, defense satellites still pointing their guns at ghosts, and at the heart of the wreckage, a signal beacon, untouched by time, still transmitting in a loop. Commissar Holt, deliverance incomplete, asset secure, retrieve, final directive, deliver the sigil. The mission did not end. Holt stood on the Shade's observation deck, watching the planet slowly rotate beneath them. His face was calm, but his hands trembled slightly, betraying the war inside him. It wasn't supposed to end this way, he murmured. Sergeant Garvin stood behind him. He didn't respond, but Holt felt the weight of his presence like a shadow grown sentient. A memory returned. The final hours of Cadia, the surface breaking apart, the sky screaming. Amid the chaos, a woman's voice firm, unshaken, giving orders no one wanted to hear. Inquisitor Sorophane. She had carried a relic in a stasis casket, a silver seal etched with runes, too old for Gothic and too sacred for common eyes. The sigil of binding, she called it, a weapon or a ward, or both. She said it was meant to be kept far from the eye, and entrusted to those who would never yield. You are Cadian, she had told him. And Cadians do not fall. And then the ground cracked and Holt had fallen into death, into darkness, into something he still didn't understand.
Now, he stood again, with the mission still alive,
with his regiment still behind him. They descended in silence. The Shade's drop bay opened with a slow groan, venting stale incense and unspoken prayers into the void. Holt led the deployment personally, stepping out into the ash-blown wind, his bolt pistol holstered, his sword at his hip. 2 platoons followed, the 71st Cadia, or what remained of it, Their steps made no sound. Their breath did not mist. Their hearts did not beat. They moved across a plain of obsidian, carved smooth by orbital fire. Hollow monoliths jutted from the ground like gravestones, each one bearing a name etched in binary. Holt brushed one with his glove and read it aloud. Expunged, expunged. He looked up. A great vault door stood ahead, set into the side of a black cliff face, half buried in rockslide. A rusted aquila hung above it, its wings melted into slag. The Mechanicus tech priest accompanying them, his name long lost, now simply Cypher 89, stepped forward and interfaced with the controls. Ancient logic words resisted, then relented. The door groaned open, revealing darkness. They entered. The vault was dead. No lights, no power, just the faint echo of footfalls and the distant sound of stone dripping water. An impossibility in an airless world. They passed through layers of decay, research chambers turned to tombs, weapon caches looted or sealed, servitors fused to walls by ancient meltdowns. There were signs of battle, burns on the walls, shattered cogitators, bolter shells long oxidized to dust. And then they found the inner sanctum, a chamber of black marble, still pristine. In its center, the sigil. It rested on a plinth of silvered stone, held in a containment field that flickered but still functioned. The object itself was unassuming. A round disc, no larger than a man's palm, etched with concentric circles that seemed to shift when not observed directly. Holt stepped forward. No one stopped him. He reached into the field. For a moment he felt resistance, not physical, but moral, as though something were watching, judging, measuring his worth. Then it passed. He lifted the sigil. The moment he did, the entire vault shook, not with motion, but with awareness. A hum passed through the walls. A whisper filled the air. He remembers. Holt turned sharply. What was that? No answer. Garvin stood behind him, weapon lowered, head bowed. The whisper came again. The oath remains, deliver us, or bind us forever. Cypher 89 flickered, his machine voice rasping. Warp echoes detected. Relic is resonating with local subspace. Power levels anomalous. Holt looked down at the sigil. It pulsed faintly, in his palm, not with light, but with something older. Purpose, memory, destiny. He placed it into a shielded reliquary case, locking it with his own code sigil. Mission resumed, he said quietly. We complete what was begun. Garvin nodded once, and somewhere deeper in the vault, a single lumen flickered to life, not powered by energy, but by something else, as if the world itself sighed in relief or anticipation. They returned to the shade. The ship accepted the sigil into its shrine chamber without protest. The reliquary was placed within a sealed sanctum, a stasis field, blessed with a dozen half-remembered litanies. Holt stood before it and recited the words as best he could. We bind what must not walk. We bear what must not fall. We serve without hope. For Kadir, for the throne, for the last watch. The moment the final word was spoken, the ship changed. The lights pulsed with new rhythm. The dead stirred slightly, not waking, but aligning, as if the entire vessel had been waiting and now remembered. Later Holt stood alone in his quarters, watching the stars from a cracked viewport. In the reflection he saw movement, but when he turned, there was nothing. His reflection lingered a second longer than it should have. He sat at his desk and opened his journal. This time, the words came easier. We did not fall. We were buried. Now we rise.
Not to avenge.
But to finish. He closed the book and activated the hololith projector. The map of the segmentum obscurus bloomed before him. Countless systems lost to war, silence, or the warp. But the sigil burned a path through them. A vector leading deeper into the dead zones, towards something Holt couldn't name. A final destination. The data flickered, and a phrase emerged in red. Final coordinates. The Black Gate. Status. Access denied.
Warning. Unbound entity detected.
Holt's breath slowed. He had heard the term before, whispered in the dying hours of Cadia, muttered by mad inquisitors, written in footnotes long erased. The Black Gate. A myth, a metaphor, or a truth no one had survived to speak of. He turned to Garvin, who had appeared silently behind him. "Do you remember this?" Holt asked. Garvin tilted his head slightly. Holt nodded. "Then we go." He keyed the Vox. All hands. New heading. Estimated time unknown. Mission unchanged. He paused. Then, quieter, almost to himself, Cadians never fall. And beyond the stars, something stirred in reply. Kalistrad had once been Cadia's proudest border bastion. A sentinel city built atop obsidian rock and adamantium bones. Its bastions had never fallen, not in 10,000 years. Even the earliest Black Crusades had broken against its fortifications, like waves against an iron shore. It was said Kalistrad's walls were blessed by Saint Macarius himself, and the defenders were carved from the same unbending stone. But now, Kalistrad was a graveyard. The Cadian 91st, those few hundred remaining souls who marched the Ghost March, approached the shattered gates of the city in silence. The wind whispered through the broken towers, carrying with it the scent of old ash and forgotten oaths. Statues of fallen generals stared sightlessly from the rubble, their once proud visages now cracked and eroded. Commissar Estar was the first to speak. This place, it shouldn't be standing. She was right. The orbital scans from the Ark. Machinekis Verity of Steel had marked Kalistrad as obliterated during the 13th Black Crusade. A hellbrute had torn open the city's core reactor, drowning the fortress in atomic fire. No one had survived. No one should have survived. Yet the city stood, not whole, no. Its spires leaned like weary soldiers. Its cathedrals were half submerged in broken rock, and its void shields shimmered weakly like a dying ember. But it stood, and from its gates there came voices, singing, low, mournful, familiar. Colonel Darnak, the grizzled leader of the 9041st, felt his blood chill. He had bled in Kalistrad's streets 30 years ago. He had lost a son here, and he remembered that song. A funeral hymn sung by Cadian mothers. "Form up," he barked. "Weapons low. No sudden moves." They entered the city beneath banners that had not fluttered in decades. As the regiment crossed the threshold, Vox units crackled, Auspex scanners screamed, and the air turned cold. The singing grew louder. They found them in the Plaza of Iron Vows, the heart of Kalistrad, kneeling in rows. Hundreds of Cadian soldiers, perfect uniforms, gleaming armor, eyes closed, lips moving to the dirge. Their skin was pale, almost translucent. Their movements slow, deliberate, synchronized as if in dream. "Emperor preserve us," whispered Estar. A junior psyker from the fleet, Maltron, reached out with his mind. He screamed. Before the others could stop him, his body burst into flames. His soul ripped from his flesh. He died with eyes wide, clawing at his own throat. The kneeling soldiers didn't flinch. Ernek stepped forward, jaw clenched, weapon lowered. "Cadians," he called. "Who commands you?" As one, their eyes open. They were violet, luminous. Wrong. Then they stood and began to march. It was not a charge, not a sprint. A march. The same cadence. The same rhythm. The very same patterns taught to every Cadian recruit since their first breath. The 94th Interficton Rexton. The steps, the drill sergeants. The spacing. But it was hollow, like a ritual repeated with no soul behind it. "Hold position," Darnak roared. But no fire was exchanged, no challenge was met. The ghost soldiers passed the 9041st, like mist stepping through them, around them, eyes vacant, lips still mouthing the song. One soldier, a youth barely 20, wide-eyed with terror, reached out and grabbed the arm of one of the passing ghosts. She turned. The ghost had no mouth. The youth screamed. The ghost kissed his forehead, and he vanished. Only his dog tags remained, clinking softly to the stones below. Panic threatened the line. Commissar Estares drew her bolt pistol and fired into the air. "Cadians do not break," she bellowed. "Form ranks. Vox officer, contact the fleet."
No signal, the Vox officer replied. "Everything's jammed. No echoes. No return. It's like we're not even on the same planet anymore."
Darnek's voice was low. "We're not." Night fell like a blade. 1 second, day. The next, utter blackness. The city began to shift. Walls moved. Spires twisted. Streets no longer led to familiar zones, but doubled back in impossible loops. Gravity fluctuated. Lights danced at the edges of vision, and in the shadows, something waited. The 91st made camp in what had once been the shrine of the Emperor's mercy. The stained glass windows were unbroken, though they now showed unfamiliar saints, figures with too many limbs, golden halos cracked with runes of the war. Guards were posted. Prayers were said. Less cells were checked and rechecked. But the ghosts returned. They came without sound, without heat, without hatred, just presence. One trooper found his dead brother standing watch beside him. Another swore she saw her old commander saluting from atop a shattered wall. They did not speak. They only marched. Darnak gathered his command staff in the center of the shrine. He'd seen enough. This is not Cadia. It's a memory. A scar on reality.
"Or a trap,"
Istara added grimly. Aye, the colonel agreed. A wound that refuses to heal. He unrolled a data slate, a map of Kalistrad, as it had been before the fall. "There's a vault below the Chapel of Steel Saints," he said, "sealed during the final siege. My son was stationed there. If anything survived that reactor burst, it'll be down there." "What are we looking for?" Ishtar asked. "A reason." They moved through the city under artificial lighting, past towers that whispered names no one remembered. Every alley held memories. Every building, ghosts. The psychers refused to go further. Some wept. One took his own life with a penknife, carving the Eye of Horus into his chest before he bled out. In the Chapel of Steel Saints, they found the vault untouched, sealed by a sigil that flickered with ancient power. Darnak placed his hand upon it. It opened. Inside, a single figure, seated, still, armored, still, armed. General Primus Harkon Veltros, commander of Kalistrad's final defense, long dead. Yet his eyes opened, and he spoke. "Sir?" Dornek whispered, saluting despite himself. "What is this place?" Astare asked. The general's gaze shifted. "A wound. A promise. A punishment. Kadia's soul was too strong to die cleanly. So we linger, in shadow, in echo." Darnak's voice broke. "My son Merrick, he was here." "Yes," said Veltros, "and he still is, as are all who died with honor. Their spirits forged the path you now walk. You hear their steps. You carry their banner. Take this. Deliver it to Terra. The truth of Kadia's fall must be known." Astar took it carefully. "What's on it?" The general looked away. Names. Betrayals. Orders that never should have been given. Lies that broke a world. Then he leaned back and crumbled into ash as the vault collapsed behind them. Darnak looked back once. He could swear he saw his son saluting him in the dust. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply marched. And so did the 90th. Ever forward. Ghosts among ghosts, carrying Kadia's memory through a galaxy that had already forgotten. There is a bell in Kadia's ruins. A bell that no one recalls forging. A bell that rings not with time but with memory. They say it was first heard in the catacombs of Khosra Kraf, buried beneath shattered spires and oceans of ash. No survivors were found there, only the echoes of madness scrolled into ferrocrete walls, and a great bronze bell that should not have survived orbital bombardment. It had no clapper, yet still it tolled. The toll was not loud. It was deep, a resonance that vibrated through the bones, through armor, through the tanks and augmetics and servo looms. The kind of sound one does not hear, but feels. And when it rang, the dead stirred. It began as a whisper on Vox channels. Ghosts of the 8th Cadian, marching with no command. Shadows of Kasakin, seen saluting empty thrones. Chimera transports, moving with no drivers. And through it all, the bell, ringing once every 23 hours and 17 minutes. Many thought it a myth. Others believed it was some cursed relic of the warp. But Lord Commissar Elandra Volk, one of the last surviving commissars of Cadia, did not believe in myth. She believed in orders, and the bell had become one. She gathered a detachment from the remnants of the 99 Atlembertonine at Cadian. Veterans broken not in body, but in soul. Men and women who had seen their castles turned to dust, their homeworld torn apart, and their faith in the Imperium cracked like the crust of Cardio itself. Their mission was simple: find the bell, silence it, and uncover its origin. Their true goal: to finally lay Cadia to rest. The march into the catacombs was slow, the terrain unnavigable, warped by tectonic violence and residual warp energy. Statues of saints stood shattered and fused into walls of black glass. Vox signals crackled with voices that had not belonged to the living in centuries. Sometimes footsteps echoed behind them, though no one walked there. Vox said nothing. She only stared ahead, hand ever resting on her bolt pistol. She'd seen men executed for less madness than what surrounded them now. They reached the lowest vault, a place predating even the Cadian Crusades. Here the walls were etched in high Gothic and Mechanicus script, descriptions of ancient rituals and pre-Macarian cults of martyrdom. There were warnings. The bell is not a warning, it is a memory. When it rings, the sins awaken. And there it was, the bell, perfect, untouched, suspended in chains that seemed to hang from nothing. It rang as they approached. Voke fell to one knee, as did many. Their memories flooded them, not in flashes, but in reality. One guardsman screamed, arms outstretched, begging for a child that had long since died. Another recited prayers to a saint who never existed. One soldier took her own life, whispering, "He told me I was already dead." But they were not hallucinations. They were real. The Emperor's tarot twisted. Auspex readings registered multiple life signs, some from those already dead. The bell did not make sound. The bell made memory. Voke, blood trickling from her ears, stood. She removed her rebreather, and then she saluted. Not the bell, but the figure standing beside it. He was tall. His armor bore the sigil of Cadia, but it was scorched, melted into his flesh. His helmet was gone, revealing eyes of pale fire.
Marshal Archon Tross.
Dead since the first wave of the Black Crusade. He nodded to her. "Still we stand," he said, and vanished. Voke gave a single order: do not destroy the bell. Instead, they set a perimeter, built a shrine around it, not of worship, but of remembrance. They called it the Cenotaph of Silence. And the bell continued to toll, not every day, not always at night, but always when the dead were forgotten. In time, rumors spread. Other regiments heard the toll, off-world, in dreams. In the moments before death, it became known as the Bell of the Last March. And slowly the Imperium began to remember Cadia not as a grave, but as a wound that still bled. Voke never left the shrine. She stood watch until the day her breath stopped. But even in death, some say she never fell. Some say she still salutes. Every time the bell rings, the Imperium has many martyrs. It has few witnesses. and fewer still who remember. His name was unknown to most. No rank, no command, not a legend, not a saint, not even a decorated soldier, just a guardsman. Cadian, by birth, one among millions until Cadia fell. And yet, long after the world cracked and the heavens bled, this one soldier marched on. Not metaphorically, literally. The first sighting came from a rogue trader on the edge of the maelstrom. He claimed to have seen a lone figure, armor scorched, helmet gone, lascan clutched in both hands, trudging through the void across a shattered asteroid. No life support, no vox beacon, no purpose, just walking. Then came reports from a hive moon near Hydra Caudatus, a figure seen in the deep, Radways, untouched by plague or time, shot at. Never fell, walked through Prometheum fire, and kept moving. His gait slow, unrelenting. Never stopped to eat, never stopped to rest. He left no footprints, but always walked towards something. Some called him a hallucination. Others, a cursed fragment of the Astronomicon. The Order Obsolenitus, keepers of the forgotten, declared him an echo of the dying faith. But on a derelict ship adrift near the halo stars, his image was finally captured on a fractured pict feed, and the words etched on his broken shoulder plate read, "Still standing." He became known as the Cadian who refused to die. Windu, on the former shrine world of Varelia, far from Cadia's ruins, the 14th Haravale Infantry was entrenched against a sudden uprising of traitor cultists. Reinforcements were weeks away. Vox interference had severed communication with the fleet. The planet's capital was lost. The situation was beyond hope. Then, in the pre-dawn mist, came the rhythmic thud of boots. Not a charge, not a platoon, just one. One man walking calmly down the shattered avenue, covered in ash. His armor bleached grey by time and radiation. Luscon fused into his hands, eyes hidden in shadow. No insignia, no rank, just the broken remains of Cadian pattern armor and a symbol that refused to fade. He walked into enemy fire, and the fire ceased. The cultists hesitated. Their blades clattered to the ground. Some screamed. Others fell to their knees, weeping blood. It was said his mere presence collapsed their spikers' minds. No one knew why. The 14th rallied, not out of courage, out of shame. They charged forward, and they won.
And when they turned back to find him, he was gone.
Only his footprints remained, smouldering, glowing faintly with green static. Doju. Soon he was sighted in dozens of war zones across the Segmentum Obscurus. He never fought, he never fired. He simply walked, and armies broke around him, on worlds where faith had failed, where the Inquisition had declared exterminatus inevitable. The mere rumor of his approach caused revolts to falter. Some began to say he was a shard of the Emperor's wrath. Others whispered he was the soul of Cadia itself, too stubborn to fall. The Mechanaticus declared him a Class Theta anomaly. The Ecclesiarchy wanted him canonized. The Inquisition wanted him erased. None could touch him. Kill teams sent to intercept him vanished. Sidetrackers lost his trail. Even the Grey Knights, sent once to contain the phenomenon, were turned away by what they described as a wall of absolute memory. Every brother reported the same vision of standing on Cadia's surface as it cracked open, feeling for the first time in their lives grief. Then he came to Cadia, or what remained of it. It was the 17th anniversary of the fall. Pilgrims and veterans had gathered across a makeshift orbital platform, a new shrine in low orbit called the Iron Vigil. They came to mourn, to remember, to swear the oaths again. He arrived without sound, walking across the void, boots scraping across a hull with no gravity. None saw him enter. All felt his presence. He stood before the gathered survivors, old Keskin, shattered commissars, lost sons of regiments erased from imperial records, and he saluted, not with pride, but with grief. He did not speak, but across every data slate, every auspex, every vox station, came a single line of unsourced transmission. Cardia stands. Not because it lived, but because we remember. And then he walked on. Very soon, they say he still walks, through warp storms, through burning hives, through the trenches of the Sabbath worlds, and the ice wastes of Agaru. He does not age, he does not bleed, and he does not stop, not because he cannot, but because he refuses. The galaxy moves on. The Imperium forgets, worlds fall, and names fade. But he remembers, and in that remembrance, there is resistance. Because so long as he walks, so long as he bears the weight of a world that would not yield, Cardia still stands, beneath the surface of the ruined world, far below the broken cassadars and shattered manufactorums. There is a place no map ever marked, a vault, that predates the birth of the Imperium, a place built not by man, but by something older, older than the Imperium, older than the Eye of Terra, older than the dream of unity itself. The place is known only as the Hollow Bastion, and it was never meant to be found. It was Sergeant Urine Thale of the 88th Cadian who discovered it, though not intentionally. His patrol had gone deep, chasing warp glimmers and ghost signals through the irradiated guts of a collapsed void shield array. Half his unit vanished in an instant. No gunfire, no screams, just static and ash. What remained of his team fell into what they believed was a collapsed munitions silo. What they found instead were doors. Massive, cyclopean slabs of obsidian-colored metal, carved with impossible sigils, symbols that made auspexes malfunction and vox recorders bleed static. One of the doors was open. Thale, driven by the madness of survival, or perhaps guided by something more ancient, went inside. What he reported in his final vox capture, before the feed dissolved into pure white noise, has become classified by 3 inquisitorial orders, but fragments survived. Whispers, buried in encrypted channels. There are thrones here, not for men. No, wrong bones. Wrong shapes, who carved this place, who bled it into being. They are not dead. They are watching us from below. Then silence. And yet he returned, naked, burned, covered in black ash and weeping golden tears. He carried no weapon, no armor, no data slate. Only a small stone shard etched with one word in ancient Terran script. Remember, the Inquisitors who questioned him did not survive the week, not from violence. No, they simply stopped functioning. Their organs liquefied. Their minds collapsed into loops of hymns, written in languages the ecclesiarchy never taught. No psychic trace, no warp taint, only memory loss, and the sense of being watched. When Lord Inquisitor Rimaeus finally arrived on Cardia's surface to investigate the Hollow Bastion, he brought with him a coterie of nulls and the psychic might of a sanctioned choir. Only 3 of them came back, and what they reported was not madness. It was warning. Beneath Cardia lay a structure, untouched by time, untouched by war. A perfect geometry of terror, impossible architecture that folded space and light. A maze not meant to contain something, but to hide it. Some theorized it was Necron in origin. Others whispered of the Old Ones. Still others, the most fearful, said it was pre-Old Night. Something from a time before even chaos had shape. And in that place the Watchers slept. Or not slept, waited. They were not daemons, not Xenos, not human. Something else, beings who had left no record in any librarium, who had whispered into the foundations of Cardia long before the first Kasra rose. It was they who had guided the Cadian bloodlines, forged their resistance, drawn the Eye of Terror to its brink. Not out of hatred, not out of loyalty, but because Cardia was never meant to be a shield. It was meant to be a lock. The pylons were not walls. They were teeth. and the planet itself was a mouth closed tightly around a name never meant to be spoken. But now Cadia was broken, the lock shattered, the teeth loosened, the watchers stirring, not awake, not yet. But their dreams leaked into the world, the bell that rang from memory, the footprints that never faded, the orders given by dead men, all of it dreams. Echoes of a prison beginning to remember what it once held. Some within the Order Malleus demanded exterminatus, as others argued the Watchers must be studied, but none agreed on what they truly were. Every attempt to catalogue them ended in madness. One scribe tore out her own eyes, screaming that sight was the sin that woke them. Another simply walked into the bastion and vanished. Now the ruins above are quiet. The bell tolls less frequently. The shrine around it has grown, built by pilgrims and remnants alike, drawn by visions they do not understand. Sometimes those who linger too long near the bastion hear it, breathing, not sound, not echo, but breath, low, slow, eternal, as if the hollow bastion is alive, and beneath it the watchers dream still, waiting for someone to speak the name that unseals them, waiting for Cadia to be forgotten. In the years that followed Caderia's fall, as the galaxy cracked open and the cicatrix maledictum split the stars, scattered remnants of the planet's last defenders emerged in the unlikeliest of places. They bore no sigils, no command, no name, only one phrase, spoken in low voices over failing vox beads. The 73rd remained, but there was no record of a 73rd Cadian. No roster, no muster, no battlefield login. Not in the archives of Segmentum Obscurus. Not in the vaults of the Minotaurum. Not even in the forbidden data hymns of the Inquisition. They were never born. They were never trained.
And yet, they fought.
Reports came from the death world of Jernakthixith, where Hive Sepulchre was besieged by demonic entities. Mid-battle, a new regiment appeared from the ash storms, helmeted figures in Cadian armor, but without rank, heraldry, or voice. They advanced without firing. The daemons turned to face them and stopped. Some screamed. Some simply vanished. Others dropped to their knees, howling. The unseen regiment walked among them in silence, untouched, unstoppable, until nothing remained but silence and scorched ground. When the PDF commander approached them in gratitude, he found only broken ash and burnt footprints where they had stood. He said they left behind no corpses, only spent last cells and the scent of ozone. Other sightings followed. On the warp-tainted moons of Altharax, where a Mechanicus exploratory team had unearthed a buried monolith, the unseen regiment arrived as the skies turned crimson. The tech priests, normally dispassionate in the face of danger, recorded what they could only describe as a pulse of null energy, as if something ancient had recoiled. The unseen moved in squads of 7. Always 7. Never speaking. Never eating. Their faces, when visible beneath cracked helmets, were chalk white, eyes glowing faint green. A survivor from that expedition, Megos Alec Vaughan, would later write, "They were not ghosts. Ghosts cry." These men did not remember how to mourn. They carried the discipline of a world that no longer exists, and the silence of one that never did. Some called them warp echoes. Some believed them to be constructs, left behind by the Blackstone pylons. Others believed they were never men at all, but fragments of something older, made flesh by Cadia's death scream. But not all were convinced they were a force for the Imperium. On the fringe world of Holdreth, a shrine world cut off by warp storms, the unseen regiment appeared inside the catacombs of the main ecclesiarchal basilica without breaching the gates. The priests who found them reported feeling the weight of judgment descend over the shrine. Some relics shattered, others wept blood. No one was harmed, but when the unseen departed, the stained glass depictions of Saint Sabbat cracked in every chapel, and yet they did not disappear. They became a pattern, They would appear on worlds where warp corruption had begun to take root, just before it reached critical mass. They would move through the battlefield as if already knowing the outcome. They never missed a shot, never spoke, never disobeyed. Those who fought beside them described feeling their presence before seeing them, a cold clarity in the air, a sense that something long buried had woken up to fulfill a single purpose. The unseen do not save. They contain. They do not rescue. They seal. Their war is not one of victory. It is one of denial. When pressed, the Inquisition refused to acknowledge their existence until one of their own, Inquisitor Maldrith Tain, went rogue. Tain had been investigating psychic disturbances tied to Cadian bloodlines. In his final report, intercepted and redacted by Ordo Hereticus, he claimed that the 73rd was real, but not created, born from Cadia's final breath, from the psychic detonation that echoed across the eye when the pylons fell, from the hope and hatred of an entire world refusing to be forgotten. He called them memory-made, not warp-spawned, not daemon-bound, but psychic echoes made physical-willed into existence by the last thoughts of a dying people. In his final transmission, he said, "These men were never born in the flesh. They were born in defiance, and they will fight until the last echo of Cadia died." Then he vanished. Since then, the 73rd has appeared more frequently, each time in places where memory itself is at stake, where history is being rewritten, where truth is being buried. Some call them the Final Guard, others call them the Cadaverians. But among those few who know, one name persists: the Unseen Regiment. It is said that they cannot be summoned, that they answer not to distress calls or battle cries, but to remembrance, that in the moments before they appear, soldiers see visions, a burning green sky, a woman screaming for her lost child, a bell tolling once, and the word Cadia. No one knows what will happen when the last of the Imperium forgets that name, whether the regiment will fade, or if they will march upon Terra itself to remind the Emperor what he lost. For now, they walk, invisible to the records, forgotten by the command, immortal in their silence. The war is not over, and so long as Cadia is remembered, they will not fall again. They called it the banner of the last regiment, but it was not stitched from cloth. It was fused from the burnt remnants of Akkadian standard, the rib plating of a fallen Kasuken, and the bone of a commissar who died refusing to retreat, welded together with molten promethium and faith. It fluttered not in wind, but in defiance. Its origin was uncertain. No vox feed showed who first raised it. No official doctrine sanctioned its message. Yet when the 47th Cadian emerged from the subterranean ruin of Casse Parthex, dragging wounded, carrying only melted guns and broken armor, the banner was there, planted in the crater where the cassette had once stood. It glowed with embers, not flame, embers, as if it had burned once and remembered the heat. They were not the same regiment that had gone in. The 47th had been 20,000 strong when they'd entered the siege. 652 returned. They walked with no words, their eyes sunken, voices hollow. They did not blink when mortars screamed overhead. They did not cry. They did not pray. But when they passed a fallen guardsman, they would stop, kneel and touch the ground, just once and move on. The banner was their only symbol. It was not placed in the Hall of Heroes. It was not praised by Terra, but it traveled from Cassid Parthex to the trenches of Rex Secundus, from the breach world of Necromunda's outer ring to the death fields of Barel Prime. Wherever it went, the Cadians followed, not as soldiers, but as ghosts. The banner seemed immune to time. Plasma could not burn it. Acid rain only blackened its edges. Warp anomalies made it shiver, but never fall. Even when planted into shattered rockcrete, it would stand perfectly upright, as if held by the hands of the fallen. And those who saw it changed. There was a Mechanicus siege construct who, upon scanning it, paused and refused to fire for 89.7 seconds. A fatal hesitation that saved an entire platoon. There was a psyker who collapsed in screams, declaring, "They walk behind the flag. All of them. All you're dead." And there was General Halvek of the Mordian Iron Guard, who, upon seeing the banner amidst the ruined husk of Cadia's moon fortress, removed his helmet, knelt and wept. He later remarked, "We march for the Emperor, but they march for each other." The last known bearer of the banner of the last regiment was Captain Rain Valas, a former Medicae turned commander. She had no great victories to her name, no relics, no honors, only scars, both visible and invisible. When the banner came into her possession, she did not speak of it. She simply bore it. She led her unit into hive ruins, infected with scrap code plagues, through warp storms that peeled paint from tanks, into Xenos tunnels that pulsed with living walls. They emerged each time, fewer, bloodier, but never broken. Volus herself was seen more often at the rear of the formation. Not in cowardice, but in protection. She saved over 400 soldiers, pulling them out of fire zones with her own hands. And yet, she never once dropped the banner. Not until Idar Khan. Idar Khan was a penal moon, once used to store forbidden archaeotech. Now it was a tomb, ripped open by the followers of the Dark Mechanicum. 1,000 soldiers entered its obsidian halls. 3 walked out. Among them, Rain Valas. She had fused the banner into her own backplate, carrying it like a relic, its haft welded to her spine. When the evacuation team found her, she was missing both legs, her eyes torn out by shrapnel. She only spoke one word: "March." She died within the hour, but not before one of her comrades removed the banner from her armor and planted it into the ground beside her grave. The flame rose again. Today, they say, it still burns. No one claims ownership. No regiment dares call it theirs. But when war comes, when hope fails, someone always finds it, standing, burning, waiting. A reminder that Cardia may have broken, but the will of its dead still marches. There are records, blurry and half-scratched, of what happened next. Fox logs gone to static. Combat logs overwritten. Entire segments of battle data corrupted in ways even the Adeptus Mechanicus could not decipher. But something survived. Not in archives, not in words, but in memory. They call it the Ghost March. Not a battle, not a retreat, not even a maneuver. It was something else. Something no tactical codex could explain. It began on the war world of Aurelia Moors, a blighted tomb moon orbiting the shattered remains of Cadia. It was here that Chaos made its final push to erase every trace of the Cadian bloodline, to salt the ruins, to make a graveyard of legacy. The 47th were not expected to hold. They weren't expected to fight. They weren't even expected to exist. Officially, the regiment had been declared destroyed 5 campaigns ago. No living officers remained. No Minotaurum files listed their rations, ammo allotments, or deployments. And yet, they were there, on Aurelia Moor, digging trenches in silence, planting makeshift bunkers from promethium drums and shattered Achilles, fixing bayonets, not for battle, but for memory. When the enemy came, Warban Karchel of the Iron Warriors, backed by traitor titans and a splinter cult of warp-drowned psychers, they did not meet formal resistance. Instead, they met the dead, not ghosts in the warp, not daemons, not specters, but Cadians, wearing scorched armor, helmets with broken visors, weapons rusted or rebuilt from scrap, and each one bearing the black mark of the 47th, the last regiment. No vox, no chance. No banners, save one, the burning banner planted in the center of the crater that had once been Aurelia's first Kasra. Its flame stood against the howling warp winds, unmoving, silent, watching. And then the Cadians marched, but not toward the enemy. Through them, the traitor Marines opened fire. Las Plasma, Bolter, even Melter. None of it mattered. The 47th advanced like a storm front. No cries of rage, no prayers to the Emperor, only the steady beat of boots, metal on dust, bone on ash. Every step marked a name. Every march remembered a fallen, and with every bullet that struck them down, more stood in their place. It was said that some among the Chaos forces broke, not from fear, but from recognition. A former guardsman, now corrupted into a Chaos spawn, dropped his flamer and wept. An Iron Warrior tore out his own augmetic eye, screaming, they were supposed to be dead, they were supposed to be gone. The Psychers tried to scan their minds. They found nothing, no fear, no pain, just a single echo. Kadia stands. Even the traitor Titans hesitated. It was not war. It was remembrance made manifest. An army of revenants, not summoned from the Imperium, but from duty, from oath, from the refusal to be forgotten. By the end of the engagement, the crater was filled with bodies. The air was thick with fire and plasma residue, but the banner still burned. Not waving, not fluttering, just burning, quietly, eternally. After the march, no one saw the 47th again. Not officially. There were rumors, a squad seen on the ice moons of Sycharis, standing silently in a trench that no one remembered digging. A Medicae claiming a mortally wounded guardsman saluted him before vanishing into ash. A shattered Leviathan transport on Jericho Reach still running, its cockpit empty, but its path set to Terra. The Adeptus Administratum tried to compile reports, to trace it all, to fit it into their ledgers, but nothing ever aligned. No timestamps, no personnel ID, no biometric confirmation, because the 47th had left the Imperium of records. They had become a memory made real, and memories do not obey orders. They say that when the need is greatest, when a world has no hope left, no support, no reinforcements, a fire appears on the horizon, not a flare, not artillery, but a banner, still burning.
And then from the mists the sound.
Boots, 1,000, marching, no songs,
No prayers.
only silence, and the sound of Kadia standing once more. It is not known who keeps the banner now. Some believe it walks on its own. Others believe it is passed hand to hand from one lost soul to another. But one thing is certain, the Ghost March never ends, because Kadia was never just a place. It was a promise, and promises do not die. Long before the Ghost March, long before the final screams over Kadia's fall, there was a secret, buried beneath rock, beneath time, beneath the silence of a people who never knew what they guarded. It was called the Black Stone. To most, it was a myth, a whisper, a strange phrase in ancient Cadian rite prayers. By stone and shield we stand. No scholar could trace its origin. No High Lord dared speak of it, and no inquisitor could tear its truth from the mouths of those who knew, because the only ones who knew were the Cadians themselves, and they never broke. But the truth always finds a way to bleed through, especially in the wake of annihilation. The Black Stone was not Cadian. It was older, built before the rise of the Imperium, before the birth of the Emperor, before even the fall of the Aldari. It was Necron in nature, but wrong, warped, as if something darker had left its fingerprints on the ancient technology. Some believed it was a shard of a Noctilith core, the material that could suppress the warp itself. Others claimed it was a prison, a lock built to bind something not of this galaxy, something that even the Katan feared. The Cadians had never been told. They didn't need to be. They simply stood guard. For 10,000 years, generation after generation, lived and died unknowingly protecting a structure they were not allowed to see. Its power seeped through the crust of Kadia, shaping its people into beings of unshakable will, unwavering defiance, and unnatural resistance to the horrors of the war. It wasn't faith, it wasn't training, it was proximity. The Black Stone had made the Cadians incorruptible, and that ultimately is why Cadia had to fall. The despoiler knew. Abaddon, War Master of Chaos, had learned the secret during the Seventh Black Crusade. He tasted the edge of the truth when his sorcerers tried to scry Cadia and saw only static, no prophecy, no clarity, just an impenetrable fog. The eye of Terra needed to expand. The great rift needed to grow. And Cadia was the nail in the warp's throat. When the planet cracked, when the pylons fell, and the surface split like glass, it was not just a military victory. It was a ritual, a sacrifice. And yet, something survived. Beneath the rubble, beneath the broken pylons and shattered casas, the Black Stone remained, fractured, but not destroyed. And in the months after Cadia's death, something began to stir around its remains. The survivors, those who had marched in the Ghost March, those who had fought on the dying Cassars, those who had refused the call to retreat, were drawn back, not by command, not by logic, but by oath. An ancient calling buried deep in their genetic memory. Something not written, but inherited. They called it the Blood Oath, a final vow, not to rebuild, not to avenge, but to seal, to finish what their ancestors had begun, to become the stone that no force, chaos or imperial, could ever break. It was not a ritual of the ecclesiarchy. There were no priests, no candle, only blades, and silence. Each surviving Cadian made the cut on their palm. Each pressed their blood into the cracked core of the Black Stone. And with each oath spoken, Cadia stands within me. The stone pulsed. Not with warp energy, but with the deep gravitational pull of ancient law. They were not sealing a weapon. They were sealing themselves into it. One by one, the last of the 47th dissolved. Their bodies transmuted into obsidian ash. Their armor crumbled. Their bones cracked like porcelain. And yet they remained. The Black Stone absorbed them. It remembered them. And in that remembering, it changed. It is said now that the Black Stone no longer slumbers beneath Cadia's grave, that it moves, slowly, quietly, carried through the stars by something not bound by time. A drifting monument. A tomb ship made of silent steel and burning memory. It appears only in systems on the verge of annihilation. Hive worlds about to fall to genostealers. Forge worlds buckling beneath demonic invasions. Shrines desecrated by the word-bearers. And when it does, something happens.
Less fire that should miss strikes true.
Men and women who should flee stand firm. Psychers who should fall to madness hear nothing but clarity. The warp recoils. Demons stutter. And somewhere, the memory of 1,000 marching boots echoes in the dark. The Mechanicus has tried to scan the Black Stone. It yields nothing. The Inquisition has sent kill teams aboard it. They never return, but neither are they mourned, for every member who enters is later seen again, marching with the silent phalanx that guards the tomb ship's halls. Even Gelamon himself, upon hearing whispers of it, said only, "Let it march, let it burn." For in the end, it is not weapons that guard the Imperium, but oaths kept in silence. And so the Black Stone moves, like a cenotaph adrift. Not a weapon, not a fortress, but a promise, carved not in stone or metal, but in blood and memory.
And the eternal oath of those who refused to surrender even when their world died.
Because Cadia did not fall in vain. It fell to rise again, not as a world, but as an idea, carried not in maps or banners, but in the hearts of the last soldiers who bled into stone, and became it. Beneath the shattered remains of Casagraph, deep within the strata of ash-choked ruins, and the broken skeletons of hab-blocks, the echoes of Cadia's final heartbeat still lingered. Though the world had fractured, the fortress city had endured, not in stone or steel, but in ritual, oath, and blood. Colonel Regent Vorton Grieg stood alone before the broken statue of St. Morven, her face long since obliterated by orbital bombardment. Her sword, once raised in defiance against the tides of the eye, lay in rubble. Yet to Grieg, it still pointed the way. He knelt in silence, whispering the rites of the Cadian Creed. Around him, the few remaining of the 312th, the last ghosts of the last regiment, moved like phantoms among ruins. There were only 37 of them now. No Vox links, no orbital command, no reinforcements. But the march had not stopped. They had reached Creth by way of the dusted ravines of Broken Talos and the warp-split caverns of Vale Sector 9, crossing through tunnels that should not have existed and enduring storms that clawed at their sanity. Each step had taken them deeper into what remained of their world, and further from everything sane. Creth was never just a castle. It had once been a hidden chamber of the Cadian High Command, a vault of relics and relic horrors, sealed after the First Black Crusade. Some said the chamber below the central cathedral was built not to keep enemies out, but to keep something within. And now, at the end, Grieg meant to open it. He did not pretend to know why, only that the voice of Lord Castellan Orsakar Creed had been heard again, or something wearing his face. A data sliver carried by a dying tech adept in the shattered plains had played a final message, corrupted and stuttering, but unmistakable. If you're hearing this, then Cadia still marches. The vault's entry was sealed by ancient Cadian passcodes, spoken in a dialect long since outlawed by the Monitorum. Yet Grieg knew them. They had been carved into his father's memory, passed down with prayers and punishments, drilled as catechisms alongside the chants of bolt discipline and ration law. The vault opened like the maw of a dead god. Inside they found weapons that bore no maker's mark, bolters too elegant for human hands, and blades that hummed with the breath of long-extinct stars. But these were not what called them. At the chamber's heart stood a sarcophagus of shimmering obsidian, chained in iron that pulsed with sigils of the Ordo Chronos. Grieg approached, his squad behind him, silent, reverent. Each one could feel the pressure in the air, time itself buckling in that space. The sarcophagus opened. What emerged was not a man, nor was it wholly machine. The figure wore a cloak of torn banners and armor, engraved with the twin-headed eagle, though faded into obscurity. A blade, identical to the sword of St. Morven, hung from its waist. Its face was an emotionless mask, but its voice, who awakens the remnant of Khasra Karef? Grieg did not hesitate. Colonel Regent Grieg of Cadia. I march for the Creed. The figure nodded once. Then the Creed marches still. They learned its name was Casus Protocol 12, a relic of the Dread Vault, crafted in the final days of Cadia's forgotten wars. It bore within it the minds of 36 Cadian strategos, fused and overwritten into one sentience. It was war, memory, and vengeance incarnate. Casus turned to the last soldiers and said, "The time has come to leave Cadia." Grieg's heart clenched. "Abandon it." "No," the machine voice answered. "Carry it." The ghosts of Cadia would not die here. They would become myth. Through Casus, a vessel was offered, a warp rift stabilizer, hidden within the vault. Not a weapon, a ship, a single-use portal. Its destination, uncertain, but survivable. The 312th gathered before it. Each one placed relics of Cadia into the ritual chamber. A helmet, a child's drawing, a broken Lascan sight, memory turned into rite. As the gate activated, the ruins of Creth began to shake. From above, orbital sensors, ancient, automated, triggered. The eye had seen them. Warp-birthed missiles began to rain from the blood-red sky. Grieg did not look back. Beyond the veil of reality, in a sector without name, a gate opened among the stars. A single drop pod, black as morning, emerged into the night. Within it, 37 souls and a god machine bearing the creed. The march of the dead continued. In a galaxy that had forgotten Cadia, she remembered herself, and she would make them remember. They fell into the stars in silence. There was no celebration, no banners raised, no triumphant horns, just the hiss of the drop pod's atmosphere regulators, and the dim red glow of its internal lumen strips flickering like votive candles in a shrine of the forgotten. The surviving 37 of the 13th and 12th Cadian stood in reverent quiet as the reality stabilizers of the pod groaned under the pressure of real space re-entry. Colonel Regent Grieg remained upright, gauntleted hands gripping the safety rails, his eyes locked on the display of a galaxy that no longer had a place for them. Cautious protocol. 12 sat motionless at the center of the chamber. It did not breathe. It did not rest. But every few minutes its head would twitch slightly, the visible ripple of 36 minds in eternal conversation. "We have exited the anomaly," it said. "Location, the Pardus Rift, segmentum obscurus, Imperial presence, none. Lost space," whispered Sergeant Kyle. "No light of the Astronomicon, no help coming." Grieg nodded. "Perfect. No one will expect us here." The pod landed upon a planet of dark rock and blue storms. Unnamed and uncolonized, marked only by ancient Imperial logs as designate for a Zeta. It had once been a mining colony, perhaps millennia ago. Now, only wind and ruins remained. The perfect grave, or the perfect fortress. For the first time since Cadia cracked, the Cadians built not trenches, but halls. Not bastions of defense, but shrines of remembrance. Within the shell of the pod and the broken towers of a long-dead hive spire, they constructed the citadel of the Creed. Stone by stone, rifle by rifle, they rebuilt the memory of their world in this unlit corner of the galaxy. And the march continued. Each day, Cassius would select one of the 37 for war tithing, a neural communion where the soldiers' memories of Cadia would be extracted, catalogued, and preserved in the vault shrine. It was painful. Many wept. None refused. They did not see it as surrender. They saw it as transmission. Cadia would not die in the warp or in the mouths of traitors. She would be remembered, encoded into flesh and fiber, carried forward not just in story, but in strategy. But war found them still. It began with echoes on the edge of the system. Vox pings. Faint, patterned. Then came the wreckage, a drifting Mechanicus vessel, torn open, trailing vox psalms that looped endlessly.
Omnissiah, protect us. Vector unknown. Anomaly in the flesh.
Grieg dispatched a recon team aboard a salvage drop cutter. They returned days later with footage. A ship, or the corpse of one. Adrift near the second moon. A black ship. An inquisitorial vessel, but not like any recorded in the cogitator halls. This one was screaming, alive. Its structure changed each hour, blooming like bone coral, rupturing and reforming as if dreaming in metal. The Vox recordings captured from within were worse. Voices of children chanting the Cadian hymn, overlaid with sobbing. Warp-born, Cassus stated. Not natural, it follows us. How? Cal asked. We burned our tracks clean, because memory cannot be erased. The machine said. Only move. Grieg gave the order. Destroy the vessel. It took 3 days of preparation, 1 mass driver warhead, and the sacrifice of 2 volunteers to manually guide the missile. The ship died like a god falling asleep, quiet, mournful, and wrong. But its death left behind a message. Etched into the surviving hull plates, deep in the underlayers, were Cadian runes, not written, scorched, as if seared by plasma fire. Stand your ground. The same phrase etched on every Cadian child's training knife. The warp had seen them. The eye had blinked. And Cadia, even shattered, had stirred its attention. The following weeks were spent in preparation. A new creed was born among the 312th. They were not to rebuild Cadia as it was. They were to spread her like a virus or a prayer. Across the forgotten sectors, the Dead March would travel into ancient battlefields, failed crusade worlds, derelict fortresses abandoned by the Imperium. Each step, each site would become a new Cadia, not by name, but by creed. Wherever one Cadian lived and died by the creed, Cadia endured. The ritual began. They called it the Pilgrimage of Fire. Each soldier would leave the citadel for a time, alone or in pairs. They would travel via salvaged warp vaults and hidden warp lanes, learned from Karsus's ancient archives, reach outlying dead worlds or warp-haunted zones, and establish shrines. They planted earth, taken from the ruins of Karsrath. They sang the litanies of Creed. They carved the twin eagles into the walls with their bayonets, and then they vanished. Some returned, some did not, but the signals always returned. Cadia was rising again, not in glory, not in defiance, but in haunting. A myth, a terror, a warning. Inquisitors spoke in hushed tones of the ghost regiments. Entire Chaos warbands had begun to report ambushes by phantoms in Cadian armor, spectral soldiers that bled black and never spoke. Imperial forces on border campaigns had recovered data slivers containing tactical doctrines not seen since the fall. Some bore the signature of Lord Castellan Creed himself. Across the segmentum, graffiti in High Gothic appeared on hive walls. Cadia stands.
And within the citadel, Grieg, now simply called the March Lord, stood before the sacred vault and placed his hand upon the shrine of Creed's last data sliver.
He looked to Karsus. To the next world, he said. And the Dead March moved once more. Across the stars, in the silent drift of void space between dead systems, a signal pulsed, untraceable, incomprehensible, forgotten by all but one. It was not a call for aid. It was not a prayer. It was a warning, ancient, grim, and unheeded. For 10 millennia, aboard the black-vaulted dreadship, the Casa Eternal, Cadia's last regiment, stirred within their cryo-tombs. 37 stasis chambers lined the inner sanctum of the vessel, like sarcophagi in a forgotten crypt. At the ship's heart sat the machine being known only as Casus Protocol 12, its form slumped like a rusted colossus upon a throne of iron and memory. But as the signal echoed through the Imperium, Casus awoke. Its lenses flickered. Its blade powered itself. Ancient protocols recompiled. Threat code. Mortius. Cadia status. Reclamation mode. Initiated.
Mission continuity confirmed.
The sleepers were roused not by alarms, but by dreams. Each soldier of the 312th emerged from their stasis, not with confusion but with purpose. They had been bred for it, trained for it, and now remade by it. Colonel Regent Grieg's voice rang through the half-lit cathedral bridge. By the creed, by the march, we wake to war. The ship descended into real space near a nameless moon-orbiting star that should not exist, a star blackened, pulsing with a heartbeat, not of nature, but of malice. There, buried beneath miles of ash glass and obsidian rock, lay the tomb world once known as Zalthik. The Imperium had purged it millennia ago, but it had not stayed dead. Reports, forbidden, archived only within the Ordo Sepultorum, had long spoken of a Necron dynasty that did not slumber like its brethren, a dynasty that moved between dimensions, harvesting the memories of the dead, not for conquest, but for replication. They did not rebuild empires, they rebuilt the fallen. And now they had found Cadia. On the moon's surface, beneath roiling storms of black static, the last regiment of Cadia made planetfall. Clad in warplate re-engineered by Casus, their lass rifles now hummed with a sickly blue light, experimental, unstable, but powerful. They bore no colors, only the ash gray of morning. They marched, down through crypt chasms, carved by forces not born of man, past statues of faceless Necron kings, past pylons inscribed with Cadian battle rites, copied perfectly, too perfectly. At last they reached it, A vault the size of a city, doors carved with the image of Cadio itself, not as it was, but as it had been, unbroken. Whole, inside the horror, rows upon rows of replicated Cadian soldiers, not armor-clad Necrons, not tomb horrors, but copies, flesh and bone, each one perfectly forged, Cadia's fallen, rebuilt from echoes. There was no life in them, only function, and worse, at the vault's heart, surrounded by these pale imitations, stood a figure wearing the face of a Sarkar Ykrid. Not the real one, not even a clone, but a machine effigy, draped in the robes of a general and speaking in his voice. Cadia lives, it said to Grieg.
No, Grieg whispered. You stole her.
Battle erupted, not with fury, but with ritual precision. The 312 fired not to kill, but to burn memory. Every false Cadian struck down was another reclamation of honor. Every echo incinerated was a soul laid to rest.
Grieg and the Machine Creed met at the vault's center, blade to blade, command to command. The machine spoke in every voice Cadia had ever known. The Creed Masters, the drill sergeants, even the final words of Grieg's own father. We are perfection, the machine said. We are immortality, Grieg answered, with silence, and a blade through its chest. Cadia does not want immortality, he said. She wants vengeance. Karsus flooded the vault with virus fire, burning through circuits and synapses alike. The false soldiers fell. The tomb world screamed, not in sound, but in silence, a data scream, echoing through Noonisphere and warp channel alike. But it was done. They had reclaimed her memory,
Not from the stars.
but from those who would dare replace her. Back aboard the Kasser Eternal, the survivors, now only 25, held a final rite for those lost, for the dead who had been copied, for Cadia itself. And then, before the eyes of all, Grieg gave the order. Launch the shard. A single stasis vault was fired into the void, containing the last uncorrupted genetic strain of Cadian lineage, not to be cloned, not to be worshipped, but to seed. Somewhere, someday, Cadia would rise again, not as a world, but as a people. As the dread ship entered warp once more, Grieg looked into the stars and whispered, "They think we died at the gate. Let them think that the dead are patient." Across the stars, in the silent drift of void space between dead systems, a signal pulsed, untraceable, incomprehensible, forgotten by all but one. It was not a call for aid. It was not a prayer. It was a warning, ancient, grim, and unheeded for 10 millennia. Aboard the black-vaulted dreadship, the Kasser Eternal, Cadia's last regiment stirred within their cryo-tombs. 37 stasis chambers lined the inner sanctum of the vessel. Like sarcophagi in a forgotten crypt, at the ship's heart sat the machine being known only as Cassis Protocol 12, its form slumped like a rusted colossus upon a throne of iron and memory. But as the signal echoed through the Imperium, Cassis awoke. Its lenses flickered. Its blade powered itself. Ancient protocols recompiled. Threat code. Mortius. Cadia status. Reclamation mode initiated.
Mission continuity confirmed.
The sleepers were roused not by alarms, but by dreams. Each soldier of the 312th emerged from their stasis not with confusion, but with purpose. They had been bred for it, trained for it, and now remade by it. Colonel Regent Grieg's voice rang through the half-lit cathedral bridge. By the creed, by the march, we wake to war. The ship descended into real space near a nameless moon orbiting a star that should not exist. A star blackened, pulsing with a heartbeat, not of nature, but of malice. There, buried beneath miles of ash glass and obsidian rock, lay the tomb world once known as Althek. The Imperium had purged it a millennia ago, but it had not stayed dead. Reports, forbidden, archived only within the Ordo Sepulturum, had long spoken of a Necron dynasty that did not slumber like its brethren. a dynasty that moved between dimensions, harvesting the memories of the dead, not for conquest, but for replication. They did not rebuild empires, they rebuilt the fallen. And now they had found Cadia. On the moon's surface, beneath roiling storms of black static, the last regiment of Cadia made planetfall, clad in warplate, re-engineered by Karsus. Their last rifles now hummed with a sickly blue light, experimental, unstable, but powerful. They bore no colors, only the ash gray of morning. They march down through crypt chasms, carved by forces not born of man, past statues of faceless Necron kings, past pylons inscribed with Cadian battle rites, copied perfectly, too perfectly. At last they reached a vault the size of a city, doors carved with the image of Cadia itself, not as it was, but as it had been, unbroken. Inside, the horror, rows upon rows of replicated Cadian soldiers, not armor-clad Necron, not tomb horrors, but copies, flesh and bone, each one perfectly forged. Cadia's fallen, rebuilt from echoes. There was no life in them, only function. And worse, at the vault's heart, surrounded by these pale imitations, stood a figure wearing the face of Ursarkai Creed. Not the real one, not even a clone, but a machine effigy, draped in the robes of a general and speaking in his voice. Cadia lives, it said to Grieg. No, Grieg whispered. You stole her. Battle erupted, not with fury, but with ritual precision. The threefold fired not to kill, but to burn memory. Every false Cadian struck down was another reclamation of honor. Every echo incinerated was a soul laid to rest. Grieg and the Machine Creed met at the vault's center, blade to blade, command to command. The machine spoke in every voice Cadia had ever known. The Creed masters, the drill sergeants, even the final words of Grieg's own father. We are perfection, the machine said. We are immortality. Grieg answered with silence, and a blade through its chest. Cadia does not want immortality, he said. She wants vengeance. Karsus flooded the vault with virus fire, burning through circuits and synapses alike. The false soldiers fell. The tomb world screamed, not in sound, but in silence. A data scream, echoing through noosphere and warp channel alike. But it was done. They had reclaimed her memory, not from the stars, but from those who would dare replace her. Back aboard the Cas Returnal, the survivors, now only 25, held a final rite for those lost, for the dead who had been copied, for Cadia itself. And then, before the eyes of all, Grieg gave the order. Launch the shard. A single stasis vault was fired into the void, containing the last uncorrupted genetic strain of Cadian lineage. Not to be cloned, not to be worshipped, but to seed. Somewhere, someday, Cadia would rise again, not as a world, but as a people. As the dreadship entered warp once more, Grieg looked into the stars and whispered, They think we died at the gate. Let them think that the dead are patient. And Cadia marched on. The ashes of Cadia still drift in the warp, not as relics of the past, but as echoing screams that claw at the veil of reality. What remains of its final regiment does not walk. It drifts through the ruined veins of a shattered Imperium, untouched by time, unbound by reason, unremembered by all save the ghosts. They are not called soldiers anymore, nor martyrs, nor Cadians. The names are gone, devoured in the eye. The scribes of the administratum have struck them from the rolls. The cogitators of Mars have lost their data streams. Even the inquisitors, those great keepers of dark memory, flinch when asked of the regiment that would not die. But they are still marching, through void and flame, through warp and silence, through the broken bones of the Imperium's hope. Their march echoes not in sound, but in dread. It is said that where they pass, vox networks fall silent, astropaths bleed from the eyes, and the dead stir in their crypts, whispering, Cadia stands. The truth is this: the last regiment never died. Not in the conventional sense, when the Blackstone fortress tore through Cadia's mantle, when the skies bled and the pylons screamed. Something broke, something deeper than stone or flesh, a rift, not just in reality, but in meaning. A final prayer had been spoken. A child, clutching a las pistol too heavy for her hands. A colonel, arm torn from his socket, still shouting orders. A commissar, blind and burning, still dragging wounded from the flame. They screamed, not for survival, but for memory. Let us not be forgotten. Let us not die in vain. Let us march still, even when our bones are dust. The warp listened, and the warp answered. Now they are seen only in flashes. A fleet in segmentum obscurus, lost for 9 standard years, found adrift, its decks covered in boot prints leading to sealed bulkheads. The markings match Cardian pattern 4. The ship's log ended on the day Cardia died. In the ruins of Vigilus, after a Black Crusade push, a Chaos sorcerer was found, screaming, eyes gouged out by his own hand, babbling in dark Gothic. They walked through the fire, they walked through my mind, they are still walking. In the bowels of Necromunda, a ganger swore he saw figures in green armor standing over the corpse of a Hive Lord. No Vox footage captured them, but every shell casing found at the scene bore the designation. They are not alive, not in the way we understand, but neither are they dead. There are whispers among the navigators, those cursed scions who guide ships through the warp, that a new path has opened, a corridor of spectral light, paved in flickering torch lines and echoing footfalls. They call it the Ghost March. Ships that follow it too long begin to lose time, begin to hear orders, begin to dream in drill chants. One rogue trader, mad and frostbitten, returned from a voyage through the Ghost March with a child soldier doll in his hand. The doll's armor bore the crest of Cadia. Inside the doll was a scrap of parchment. On it, only 2 words, still standing. The Lord Inquisitor, who questioned him, set the parchment aflame and ordered the man's memory purged. No one speaks of it now, at least not aloud. But the Black Templars know, the Astra Telepathica know, and somewhere deep beneath Terra's crust, a lone tech priest has carved a hidden cogitator shrine. Upon it are recorded the last known coordinates of the regiment, a place where time fractures and the stars forget their names. It is not a shrine of mourning, it is a beacon, for they will return.
Not in ships, not in massed force, but in moments, in ruin, in vengeance.
For every pylon that fell, for every child that screamed, for every Cadian whose name was eaten by the warp, they will return. And on that day, when the walls of reality bend and the stars dim, and even the traitor Primarchs turn their gaze, they will hear it. A single drumbeat, a single march, a single name, whispered from the dead, Cadia. And in that moment, even the gods may tremble.